Emily Morgan was a bright, compassionate nurse with a promising future, but one fateful evening in 2002, she disappeared without a trace. Her best friend Sarah Owens, devastated by the loss, never suspected that the man she had married, Tyler Grant, might be hiding a dark secret. Years later, as the case grew colder, Detective Angela Ramirez uncovered a chilling connection between Emily's disappearance and Tyler, one that would unravel everything the small town of Beaumont thought they knew about their neighbor. What was Tyler hiding? And could he be the key to solving Emily's murder? In the small, close-knit town of Beaumont, Texas, the disappearance of 23-year-old Emily Morgan sent shockwaves through the community. Emily had always been a bright, caring individual. She worked as a nurse at the local hospital, often going above and beyond to help her patients. She was known for her warm smile, her infectious laughter, and her genuine kindness. Those who knew her described Emily as someone with a promising future, a woman who always put others first. She had dreams of one day becoming a nurse practitioner, and had already started taking courses to make that dream a reality. Her family and friends couldn't have imagined that one day she would simply vanish, leaving behind nothing but questions and a cold trail. The night of October 16th, 2002, started off like any other. Emily had made plans to meet up with a friend at a local cafe for dinner. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, and the idea of someone disappearing without a trace seemed impossible. The evening was crisp, the air carrying a slight chill, and the cafe was bustling with activity as people enjoyed their meals and shared laughter. Emily's friend had arrived first, but when Emily hadn't shown up on time, she began to worry. It wasn't like Emily to be late, especially for something as simple as dinner. When the friend tried calling, there was no answer. She waited for another 30 minutes before she began to feel uneasy. Something didn't sit right, so she left the cafe, hoping to find Emily. As she walked outside, her eyes caught something unexpected. Emily's car was parked in front of the cafe, the engine still running. The door was unlocked, and her purse was on the passenger seat. But Emily was nowhere to be found. A frantic search began immediately. The police were called, and they began canvassing the area. Local businesses were checked, and surveillance footage was reviewed. Emily's family was notified, and they arrived at the scene, terrified and in disbelief. The search intensified, but there were no signs of Emily. No witnesses had seen her leave the cafe or walk anywhere nearby. Her cell phone had no traceable activity, and her social media accounts went quiet. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and the search continued, but the trail grew colder. The town, which had once been full of laughter and community, now felt eerily silent. Emily's family held vigils, hoping for a break, for anything that could explain where their daughter, sister, and friend had gone. The local authorities, too, were at a loss. There were no ransom notes, no leads, no apparent motive. It was as if Emily had stepped into another world, leaving behind the life she had built so carefully. In the absence of concrete evidence, theories began to swirl. Some speculated that she had run away, though that seemed unlikely to those who knew her best. Emily was not the type of person to leave without a word. Others suggested foul play. But there was no immediate suspect, no obvious connection to anyone who might want to harm her. The case became a mystery, one that would gnaw at the town's soul for years to come. It was a mystery that no one could seem to solve, and with each passing day, the question remained, where was Emily Morgan, and who was responsible for her disappearance? 4 years before Emily Morgan's disappearance, there had been another significant event in the small town of Beaumont that, at the time, seemed completely unrelated to the case. Emily had been a bridesmaid at the wedding of her close friend, Sarah Owens. Sarah, a fellow nurse at the hospital, had known Emily for years, and the two shared a deep bond. Emily had been there for Sarah during difficult times, and Sarah had been a constant support for Emily. They had celebrated birthdays, shared secrets, and stood by each other through life's ups and downs. So when Sarah got engaged to a man named Tyler Grant, Emily couldn't have been more excited for her friend. Tyler, a mechanic who had grown up in Beaumont, seemed like the perfect match for Sarah. He was charming, well-liked by those who knew him, and had a way of making everyone around him feel comfortable. The wedding was set for the spring, and the town was abuzz with excitement. On the day of the wedding, Emily was there in full support of Sarah, helping her get ready and organizing last-minute details. The ceremony was held at a beautiful chapel outside of town, and it was a typical small-town wedding, intimate, filled with laughter, and attended by friends and family who had known the bride and groom for years. Emily was a radiant presence that day, glowing in her bridesmaid dress as she moved through the crowd, checking on Sarah, ensuring everything was running smoothly. At one point, Sarah pulled her aside to thank her for being such an incredible friend. It was a moment that would remain etched in Emily's memory forever. Tyler, as the groom, was the center of attention, of course. He smiled widely, shaking hands and chatting with guests as though everything was perfect. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about him. She had always considered Tyler a good friend to Sarah, but in the months leading up to the wedding, Emily had started noticing small, unsettling behaviors. At a few gatherings, Tyler had seemed unusually possessive, always keeping Sarah close and watching her every move. Emily, being an observant person, began to feel that Tyler's attentiveness was more than just love it was controlling. On the wedding day itself, Emily's unease grew. During the reception, she overheard a conversation between Tyler and one of his friends. Though she couldn't hear the exact words, she saw the tension in his posture and the intensity in his gaze. He seemed on edge, like something was bothering him. Emily dismissed it at the time, attributing it to pre-wedding jitters, but in hindsight, she began to wonder if there was more to the story. In her heart, she hoped it was nothing, just a brief moment of nervousness, but something about Tyler's behavior didn't sit right with her. Throughout the evening, Emily noticed that Tyler seemed to keep his distance from the other guests, especially the women. He would watch them from across the room, his eyes lingering a little too long. At one point, Emily and Tyler had a brief interaction. She asked him if he was enjoying the celebration, and his response was polite but curt, almost as if he were uninterested in her question. He quickly turned away and started talking to another group, but there was a sharpness in his movements that stuck with her. Emily didn't know it then, but that moment would be the first sign that Tyler Grant wasn't who he appeared to be. As the evening came to a close, Emily and Sarah exchanged a few final words. Emily told Sarah how happy she was for her and how beautiful the wedding had been. Sarah, full of joy, assured Emily she couldn't have done it without her. It was a happy moment. But there was something lingering beneath the surface. Tyler was by Sarah's side, watching the two women talk, and for a split second, Emily felt an uncomfortable sense of being watched. But the night was too joyful, and Emily tried to push the thought away. No one, not even Emily, knew just how significant that wedding would become in the months to come. Tyler Grant's behavior would eventually become more troubling, and Emily's instincts about him would prove to be eerily accurate. However, it would be years before the full truth came to light, years that would turn a celebration of love into the backdrop of an unimaginable tragedy. What Emily had noticed that day, those subtle signs of control, the lurking unease, would soon tie her directly to a chilling cold case, and the question of whether she had known too much, too soon, would soon come to the forefront. 6 years had passed since Emily Morgan's disappearance, and the case had grown colder with each passing day. The community of Beaumont was still in shock, unable to fully process the loss of a young woman who had been a friend, a sister, and a daughter. The police, after exhausting every lead and working tirelessly with little success, had put the case on the back burner. No one could understand how a person could vanish from their lives so completely without a trace. But as time went on, an unexpected breakthrough came from a source no one could have predicted. Detective Angela Ramirez, a seasoned investigator who had recently been reassigned to the cold case unit, began combing through old files. She was determined to solve a case that had stumped so many before her. As she sifted through the box of old case notes on Emily's disappearance, one detail caught her attention: Tyler Grant. The name had appeared briefly in the early stages of the investigation, but no one had thought to follow up. Tyler had been a quiet, upstanding member of the community, a man who seemed to have it all together. He was a local mechanic with a good reputation and a solid group of friends, including Emily. His name had been mentioned in passing, but there had been no obvious reason to connect him to the case. Detective Ramirez, however, was meticulous. She had seen too many cases slip through the cracks because of overlooked details, and she wasn't going to let that happen here. As she reviewed the police reports and spoke with the original investigators, she began to notice subtle discrepancies in the way Tyler had been described. His friends and family painted a picture of a man who was friendly, charming, and easy to trust. But as Ramirez dug deeper, she began to uncover a different side of Tyler. There were rumors, whispers from old acquaintances that Tyler had a temper. Some recalled stories of past relationships where he had been possessive, even aggressive. Others noted his tendency to isolate his partners from friends and family. There was something about him that didn't sit right. Ramirez's gut told her that this was worth investigating further. She decided to interview people who had known Tyler in the years before Emily's disappearance. One by one, she spoke to former colleagues, friends, and acquaintances. Some didn't have much to say, but others shared stories that painted a disturbing picture of the man behind the smiling, charming exterior. One witness recalled seeing Tyler at a local bar not long before Emily went missing. Tyler had been unusually focused on a woman at the bar who, according to the witness, appeared uncomfortable with his advances. This wasn't the first time someone had mentioned Tyler's unsettling behavior toward women, and it was starting to form a pattern that couldn't be ignored. But it wasn't just Tyler's past that made Ramirez's investigation interesting, it was the connection to Emily. The more Ramirez dug into Emily's life, the more she discovered about the close friendship between Emily and Sarah Owens, the woman Tyler had married. Ramirez uncovered a disturbing detail: Emily had been a bridesmaid at Sarah and Tyler's wedding. This connection was a key piece of the puzzle. Emily had known Tyler intimately, and from the testimonies of people close to her, it seemed that she had always found him a bit strange, a bit possessive. No one had thought much of it at the time. Emily had always been protective of her friends, and perhaps she was just being cautious, as she had often been about people she didn't trust fully. But now, years later, Ramirez saw things differently. The possibility that Tyler had been involved in Emily's disappearance seemed more likely with every new piece of information she uncovered. Tyler had known Emily well. He had been part of her life at a crucial time, and his role in the wedding seemed all the more suspicious in light of the rumors about his behavior. Ramirez wasn't sure yet whether Tyler was directly responsible for Emily's fate, but one thing was becoming clear: the man who had once seemed so charming had a far darker side, and Emily's disappearance may have been more personal than anyone had ever realized. The detective now had a hunch Tyler Grant was at the center of this mystery, and it was time to find out why. As Detective Ramirez continued her investigation into Tyler Grant, the more chilling details she uncovered. Tyler's life was not as perfect as it had once appeared. Behind the facade of a friendly, well-liked mechanic, she found a man who had a history of controlling and obsessive behavior. Conversations with former friends and colleagues revealed a pattern of relationships marred by possessiveness and manipulation. There were whispers of emotional abuse, broken relationships, and incidents where Tyler had displayed a violent temper. But most shocking of all was the realization that Tyler had been involved in several disputes with women who had tried to end their relationships with him, each time becoming more aggressive and determined to keep them close. Ramirez was now convinced that Tyler had played a far more significant role in Emily's disappearance than anyone had originally suspected. What had seemed like a chance encounter between Emily and Tyler at Sarah's wedding now appeared to be part of a larger, more disturbing picture. Emily had been close to Sarah, and though their friendship seemed solid, there were signs that Emily might have been growing uncomfortable with Tyler. Witnesses who had known Emily in the months leading up to her disappearance began to recall strange interactions she had had with him. One friend remembered Emily saying that she thought Tyler was too intense, and that she felt he was always watching her. Emily had also confided that she had noticed Tyler's possessiveness during Sarah's wedding, an odd behavior that had stayed with her long after the event. The more Ramirez pieced together these fragments of memory, the clearer it became that Tyler's obsession with Emily had not been a passing phase. It was something that had been simmering for quite some time. As Ramirez looked deeper into the timeline of events leading up to Emily's disappearance, something unsettling caught her attention. In the weeks before Emily went missing, Tyler had been seen at various local spots where Emily had visited. It seemed that wherever she went, Tyler was not far behind, often appearing uninvited. A former co-worker of Emily's recalled a strange encounter between the two at the local cafe, where Emily had been meeting a friend shortly before her disappearance. Tyler had been there, sitting alone at a nearby table, watching Emily from a distance. The interaction between the two had been brief, but the co-worker recalled the tension in the air. Emily had looked uncomfortable, even trying to avoid eye contact with him. Detective Ramirez couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread that accompanied these revelations. It was clear that Tyler had been keeping an eye on Emily, perhaps even stalking her, and it seemed increasingly likely that he had crossed a dangerous line. As Ramirez dove deeper into Tyler's past, she also uncovered a series of failed relationships, each marked by strange, possessive behavior. One former girlfriend had reported that Tyler had once shown up unannounced at her house after they had broken up, pleading with her to come back. When she refused, he became angry and threatening. Another woman had claimed that Tyler had been so obsessed with her that he would show up at her workplace, watching her from his car. The more Ramirez learned, the more it became evident that Tyler's need to control those around him had gone unchecked for years. The pieces of Emily's case had begun to fit together like a twisted puzzle. Her disappearance wasn't random, it was the result of Tyler's obsession with her. Emily, it seemed, had become another woman caught in his dangerous grip. Ramirez now had a decision to make. With mounting evidence pointing to Tyler as the prime suspect, it was time to confront him. But as she prepared to approach him, she knew that this wouldn't be an easy task. Tyler had been able to manipulate those around him for years, and he was skilled at maintaining his calm, friendly demeanor. However, Ramirez was determined to bring justice to Emily's family and uncover the truth behind her tragic fate. She was ready to confront the man who had so carefully concealed his dark side, and she would stop at nothing to make him face the consequences of his actions. Detective Ramirez stood outside Tyler Grant's house, feeling a mixture of apprehension and determination. After weeks of digging through old records, interviewing witnesses, and connecting the dots between Tyler's past and Emily's disappearance, she was certain of one thing: Tyler Grant knew far more than he had ever let on. The quiet, unassuming mechanic who had once been admired by the community for his charm and reliability was now at the center of a dark mystery, and today Ramirez was going to confront him. As she knocked on the door, she felt the weight of years of unanswered questions pressing down on her. The door opened slowly, and Tyler stood in the doorway, wearing a faint, almost casual smile, as if nothing was amiss. He greeted her with the same friendly demeanor she had seen in all the old interviews and reports: charming, confident, with just the right amount of politeness. It was the mask he had worn for years, and Ramirez knew that under it, he was anything but the man he appeared to be. "Detective Ramirez, what can I do for you?" Tyler's voice was calm, but there was a tension in his eyes, a flicker of something deeper. He clearly hadn't expected her visit, but he wasn't immediately worried. Not yet. Ramirez wasted no time. "Tyler, I'm investigating the disappearance of Emily Morgan," she said, her tone steady but firm. "We've uncovered new information, and you're going to have to answer some questions." For a moment, Tyler remained still. His expression didn't change, but Ramirez noticed the slightest shift in his posture. He had gone from casual to guarded. He stepped back slightly, allowing her inside, but the tension in the air was palpable. They sat down in the living room, where Tyler offered no drink or pleasantries, only silence. He seemed to be weighing his words, deciding how much to reveal or whether to reveal anything at all. "Emily was a good person," Tyler began, his voice low, almost too controlled. "She was a close friend of Sarah's. I don't know why you're bringing this up now. There's nothing for me to say. I've already told the police everything I know." Ramirez wasn't deterred. She had already listened to all of his previous statements. "We've spoken to several people, Tyler. Your past relationships, your behavior, especially around women, it all points to something troubling. Emily had started distancing herself from you, and witnesses recall you being overly possessive of her, even before she disappeared. Why don't you tell me what really happened, Tyler? We know you were involved." For the first time, Tyler's calm facade faltered. His eyes narrowed and his jaw clenched. But he didn't speak immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, clearly struggling to maintain control. His silence was deafening. Ramirez pressed on. "You were at Sarah's wedding. Emily was one of your closest friends. She confided in others that she felt uncomfortable around you. Did you think she would just disappear without anyone suspecting you?" Tyler's lips twitched, but he remained silent. The weight of the detective's words seemed to hit him harder than he had anticipated. After a long pause, he finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what it's like, Detective," he muttered, his eyes darkening. "People don't understand. Emily, she was different. She wasn't like the others. She didn't appreciate what I did for her. She didn't understand how much I cared." His words grew more frantic, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. "She was going to ruin everything. She didn't know her place. I couldn't let her do that." Ramirez's heart raced as she processed his words. This wasn't a man who was simply defending himself. This was a man who felt entitled to Emily's life, who thought he had the right to control her, to bend her to his will. And when she pushed back, when Emily started pulling away, he had taken matters into his own hands. Tyler's demeanor shifted dramatically. His calm mask had completely fallen away, and the darkness within him was now fully visible. "I didn't want it to happen this way," he said, his voice rising in anger. "But she forced my hand. She wouldn't listen. She wouldn't stay. So I made sure she couldn't leave. Not ever." The confession came like a punch, and it hit Ramirez hard. She had suspected this for weeks, but hearing him say it out loud was a stark confirmation of the horror that had been unfolding in this small, unsuspecting town. Emily's life had been taken not because of a random act of violence, but because of a twisted obsession that had festered for years. Tyler Grant was arrested and charged with Emily Morgan's murder. His calm, polite exterior had masked a deep well of rage and control that had culminated in tragedy. The community, still reeling from the shock of his arrest, began to understand the depths of the man they had trusted. Tyler's charm, his seemingly perfect life, had all been an illusion, a mask that had concealed the darkness lurking beneath. For Emily's family, the pain of her loss would never fully heal. But with Tyler's confession, they finally had the closure they had desperately needed for years. Emily's memory could now be honored properly, and justice had been served. Beaumont would never forget the lessons learned from this tragic case, that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who hide in plain sight.